Want to utilise your soul for multi-attacks? Gain some nice big numbers whilst also thinning at the same time. Let's dive in to Luquier. What's up YouTube, Matt here. As you can obviously tell by hands and cards, we are here for deck profile again. And as I mentioned in the little intro bit, we are covering Luquier. So this is going to be my standard format Luquier deck. And I'm just going to go through all the cards, explain what they do, and then show a basic grade 3 turn so you can see how the deck actually functions. And as I'm going through, I'll mention some other options you can include in case you don't want to use the cards that I wish to use. So let's get started off with the ride line. And our ride line is the Arena. We've got the Lillian, and then we round up with the Luquier. Obviously, starter I have gone for Ionella just for the fact of it's a Pale Moon card. Just for the fact of in case you need it for the use with Hurry and Join Us, My Loyal Servants order. So that is very useful because obviously, if just in case you need to call a Pale Moon out because you've got nothing else, it is nice to have the starter just in case. Then we move on to Irina. Irina's skill is that when she's rode upon by a unit with only Pale Moon in its clan, you can look at the top 7 cards, choose a card from among them, and put it into your soul. And this is really nice because obviously we're doing our top 7 check to find a piece that we want in our soul for our combos and putting it where we want it, which is really nice to have. Next up, we do have our Lillian. Now, Lillian's got 2 skills that we use. First one being when she's placed on the Vanguard, when she's rode upon by a unit with only Pale Moon in its clan, you can soul charge 1, choose a card from your soul, and put it into your hand. So this can be really comboed nice with Arena, because if you don't see something that you want to actively put in your soul, you can choose a card with Arena that you're then going to add to hand with Lillian, like a Perfect Guard, for example, or a Persona Ride of Luquier. Plus, Lillian's also got the additional skill of when she's placed on Rearguard or Guardian Circle. As long as you've got a Luquier Vanguard, she gains 5,000 power and 5,000 shield. So, scales up to be a 15k attacker or 10k shield, which is really nice for the deck. But let's then move on to the boss unit of Luquier. So, Luquier's got 2 skills. First one being Act Vanguard Circle. Once a turn, you can count +1 and choose a card from your hand and put it into your soul. You can then choose up to 3 cards from your soul with different grades and call them to Rearguard Circle. Then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, they all gain 5,000 power. And her second skill is Auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of your turn, you can choose 2 of your Rearguards, put them into your soul, and you draw a card. So first one's really nice for the sheer fact of we're creating a board from 1 card in hand, getting 3 back out again. So technically it becomes a +2 as such, which you're turning 1 into 3. Yes, it is combo, it is building up the board, but then you've also got the fact of Luquier will then put them back into soul with her second skill to turn the +2 on the board to an actual +1 in hand, which is really nice to have. Technically it does make it a -1 because you're trading 2 cards in for 1, but with retired decks still being a prominent part of the meta, you're keeping your combo pieces in your soul where it's safe. Plus you can also then utilise them again next turn to get their on-play skills, because obviously their on-play skills will activate off the first skill to letting you carry on the extensions, and then you're keeping them safe to do it again every single turn, which is really nice to have. Nice simple ride line, pretty much standard for all Luquier decks. Then we move on to the grade 3s. So first grade 3 we do run 3 extra copies of our Persona Rides, because obviously Persona Riding is very important in Overdress. So obviously maxing out the copies is the best. Next we run 3 copies of Hurry and Join My Loyal Servants. Now this has had a name errata from the actual physical version, because in Japan this was Silverthorn but a different kanji to the actual Silverthorn name. So when it got brought over to English, it was literally just given Silverthorn, which makes this a searchable card in English where it's not in Japanese. So they have errated it to not have the Silverthorn name, but obviously they've not done a physical reprint like they did with some of the other cards. So you do have to be careful. But Hurry and Join Silverthorn Silence got the skill of, you can play this card from your soul if your Vanguard is Luquier. And then you can counterblast one for the cost of this card. Then skill is choose one of your rear guards, and it gets the skill of Auto. When your Vanguard attacks, you may put this card into your soul, and then choose a Silverthorn card from your soul and call it to rearguard circle until the end of the turn. So this is what enables the multi-attack in the deck. So you do want to keep this going quite regularly. Plus the fact that we can actually utilise it as a play from our soul means that we can utilise cards that put stuff from places that we don't usually have access to, like drop zone and deck, into the soul to then utilise it out of soul again, so we can get some really nice combos going, which is really interesting. But it is a very important card for the fact that it is our only form of multi-attack in the deck. And the next card is a personal choice that I run that others don't run. And that is 2 copies of the Heat Haze Acrobat Miroslava. So Miroslava's got the skill of, when she's placed on rearguard circle from hand, you can counterblast 1, and then choose a card from your soul, and if it's a grade 3 or less unit, you can call it from soul to rearguard circle, but if it's got the same name as your Vanguard, you can add it back to your hand. And if you added a card back to your hand, she then gains 5,000 power. So the reason I run Miroslava is for the fact of, when I haven't got access to the order, this still allows my Rising Dragons to hit the full numbers, because Rising Dragon needs 4 units called from soul for his 20,000 power. Whereas Luquier only provides 3, this gives that final one to give the extra 10k power, which is really nice. Plus it can work nicely if you combo off it with cards further down the list, but I'll explain them down the line. If you do not wish to run Miroslava, you can swap these into 2 copies of the grade 3 countercharger. But you then do have to be wary, because obviously it's a grade 3 in your soul, and you've got to time it right with all your soul chargings and monitoring your soul, especially with Foul State Performer. And also the fact of, you don't want to drain your soul too much, because then you won't have the correct pieces you may need for the right time for Luquier, especially for the fact of your soul blasting for Breathing Dragon alongside it. So it does require a lot of thought and preparation. That's it for grade 3s. Let's move on to grade 2s. And the grade 2s are very simple. It's 3 more copies of our Marionette Lillian, because the 10k shield, 15k attacker is still really nice to have. Plus also the fact of its extra Pale Moons in the deck, which the Hurry and Join My Loyal Servants does actually need Pale Moons in Soul to work off of. So having the extra copy of these does help. And then we mentioned it briefly a minute ago, we do run 4 copies of our Silverthorn Rising Dragon. So Rising Dragon does have 2 skills. First one being, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you can put a card from your hand into your soul and then draw a card. And then his second skill is continuous rearguard circle. When this unit, during your turn, if you've Vanguard with Luquier in its card name, if you called 2 or more cards from your soul this turn, this unit gets 10,000 power. Then if you called 4 or more cards from soul this turn, this gets an additional 10,000 power. So this is our beat stick of the deck. It starts off 10k base, then scales up to a maximum of 30k depending on the number of calls you called from soul. So having that's really nice, plus it's a filter on top, and we can utilise this to help set up our soul to then combo off further with what we're going to call from Luquier. But it also helps us use combos like we can put the Hurry and Join My Loyal Servants into Soul to draw a card and then activate it from Soul, so then we're not minus wanting from hand to play our order. So it does create some very interesting combos to work with. All in all, really nice card. But then we move on to the grade 1s. And the grade 1s is where it takes up quite a few different options, because we've got some really nice stuff to play around with. First up is obviously we do run 4 Perfect Guards. So 4 Perfect Guards are staple. We've got 3 normals plus the 1 Elementaria Sanctitude. Just for the fact of Chronojet is big. We've got Messiah incoming. Magnolia may see a big reoccurrence once they get their Amalia clone. So just having the Sanctitude for the 3 Perfect Guards is really nice as well. I've just gone for 3 different ones, but these are all the same skill. With if you've got 1 or less cards in hand, you don't have to discard. Next up is I do run 4 copies of Falsate Performer. So Falsate Performer's got the skill of when this unit boosts, you can choose a card from your drop zone, and if you do not have a card with that grade in your soul, you put that card into your soul. So say for example, this boosts your Vanguard, and your soul is a grade 2 and a grade 1. If you then choose a grade 3 card from your drop zone, you can then put that grade 3 card from your drop zone into soul. So this lets us recycle our pieces, and does let us combo off further with the early game with our actual ride deck. So if we see this on turn 1, we can manipulate our ride deck discards to then push our soul up even higher to a good early game count. And it's got the good late game retention of getting bits that we've soul blasted back into soul or used from our soul. So it creates so many additional combos. It's a really nice card to have. Next up is 4 copies of Silver Thorn Breathing Dragon. So Breathing Dragon's got the skill of when this unit is placed on a back row rearguard circle, if you've got a Vanguard with Luquier in its card name, you can pay the cost of Soul Blast 1 to give your Vanguard the skill of Continuous Vanguard Circle. All of your front row rearguards gain 5,000 power. So this is adding extra scaling to our already good scaling rearguards. So it does let the likes of Miroslava, for example, which is 13k base, plus the Persona Ride makes 23k, plus this 5k, then makes Miroslava into a 28k attacker, which is forcing either a 20k front or a trigger and an additional shield. So it does help us hit magic numbers ever so slightly better, which is really nice to have. It doesn't need to be called via Luquier skill, so it can combo off nicely with this being a Miroslava call target. So really nice to have. Obviously the Soul Blast, you do, as I said earlier when we were talking about the count charger, you do need to be wary of what you do and don't Soul Blast and how often you Soul Blast. And the final card I run in grade 1 slots is 2 off tech that I really enjoy in the deck, and that's 2 copies of Evil Eye of Prohibition Quen Lu. So what Quen Lu does is, at rearguard circle, put this card into your soul. You then choose one of your rearguards and gets 2,000 power to end a turn. Then if your soul has 7 or more cards, the opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from their hand to the Guardian Circle for the battle that this unit attacks until end of turn. So this is my adding an additional win con into the deck. So obviously we all know how big the Rising Dragons get. So being able to put a Quen Lu onto a Rising Dragon that's 30k, 40k with Persona Ride, plus a booster, 48k. They either have to guard with 3 triggers, or a front and a front, or take the attack. So it gives us an additional win con for the deck. And if you do 2 of these, 1 on each side, if you're not multi-attacking that turn, you're still providing a lot of pressure. So it gives us an alternative win con to the deck, which is really nice. And it gives us alternative options in case we don't actually see our order. Yes, the deck does become more consistent in finding the order once we actually get our new promo. But until then, this is a really nice alternative win con. If you choose to not run Quenlu, you could change this to one more copy of the order. You could also add a regardless piece. There are other options you could do. You could even add in 2 copies of the Riderline Irina. Because she does still have the rearguard skill of when she's placed on rearguard circle, you can soul charge one, so it helps build up the soul. That's different options, and if you want to keep the Miroslavas, you can make these 2 into the counter charges. There are multiple different options you can go with the Pale Moon deck that is really nice to have. But then we've got our final part, which is our triggers. So triggers, we've gone for obvious Dark States over trigger, just because we do like the extra crit, 10k crit on the Vanguard. Because Luquier's column is the weakest column out of all the attacks you actually do in the deck. So having the 10k crit pressure from the Dark States over trigger is really good. Then we run our 7 criticals. Because criticals are very important in this game. You will obviously always run them. But we have obviously gone for 4 draws for the fact of we are still a piece reliant deck. So having the additional draws really nice. And just digging deeper. I know people do like to run fronts, and that is still an option. But because we don't actively build up a lot of hand, most of ours is filtering. I do prefer the extra draws to actually try and create a hand out of it, so we can actually try and survive a bit longer. And we then do round out, obviously, with 4 heals. Depending on your meta, you can obviously change up the heals. You can run the counter heals. There's 3 different ones. You've got your first one in the... I can't remember half their names, but you've got the crit heal. You've got the restand heal. And you've also got the grade 4 heal that's just come out in set 9. But personally, for now, I've just gone for the 4 basic heals because it's not that important because we are a very aggro deck. We want to be swinging hard, swinging fast. We're not going to live long anyway. So, not really as important for us. Whereas, comparing it to, like, a example being the Blues Augur deck, where it's wanted to be a bit more tanky, and it can reutilize those shields, then it does become a lot more important in which counter heal do you actually pick. But that's for this. I shall cut back to this once I've actually got the grade 3 test hand set up. Alright, and here we are back with our basic field. We have got a very good soul. That we've got, obviously, this off of our Falsate. This was put in off of our Arena Soul Charge. And this was put in off of our Rising Dragonplay. Just so we are now very much set up to go off. As you can see from down here, we have got a very decent hand to work with. But let's get started. So we draw for turn. Gotta love draw for turns. So we're going to discard our Miroslava, because we don't actually need it for this turn. And ride up into Luquier. So Luquier skill, we got the ride up skill, so Lillian, we soul charge 1. And we hit a Falsate, which is really nice. But from what we've got here, we're just going to grab the basics of the shield, because we've got our combo pieces in soul that we can actually go off with. So, no real need to beat around the bush. We're just going to go straight into Luquier's skill, and counterblast 1. A card from our hand into our soul. And we then choose 3 cards from our soul to call to a rearguard circle. So we're going to call Rising Dragon. We're going to call our Breathing Dragon. And we're going to call out the Inella, because we need 3 different grades. And obviously the 0 is very nice to keep out in the soul for that reasoning. Then obviously both continuously then kick in. Both Breathing Dragons. Rising Dragon, sorry, saw the 10k. For this example, our opponent is a grade 3 Vanguard. So we are going to get the 3 lots of 5ks. We're then going to activate skill of Breathing Dragon. So from our soul here, we don't actually need the arena at this stage anymore, because we've got good other grade 1s that we've got access to in our cycle in Falsate Performer and Breathing Dragon. So that is going to give 5k, which I'm going to put separately due to the fact of the order. They're going to sit on the front row. Then our Breathing Dragon, not Breathing Dragon, Rising Dragon, we're going to put another. Now we're going to put the Lillian into Soul, I feel, and draw a card. Which we've now got another Rising Dragon, which we can filter into Soul with our recall, because we're now going to activate our order. So activate the order from Soul, leaving our Soul being grade 2s, grade 1s, which will combo off nicely with the Falsate. And Counterblast 1 to pay the cost. And we're going to give the skill to this card here, because obviously it's going to be a bigger number naturally before the swing. Before the Vanguard swing, because obviously it's got the 5k given from Luquier's skill. So battle phase begins. We start off with this swing, which is 10, 15, plus the 15, so 30k. We then attack with the Vanguard. Now this is where normally skill timing would actually pay very big preference. So say for example this was actually a Mirror Slava, we'd want to be resolving Falsate first, because then we can then grab the order back into Soul and it not have the grade 3 restriction being in Soul. So whilst it doesn't matter at this point, we can then grab this into Soul with the Falsate skill, and then activate the ordered skill to put this into Soul, and calls back out. Then the continuous kicks in again, which is this is now called 4, so both sides do become 20k bases. And obviously the on place, we're going to put Breathing Dragon into our Soul, and draw a card. I love drawing triggers, it seems. So, all set up, and we do our twin drive. We got first check, crit trigger, very nice. So crit here, and power here, and I haven't got actual crit, so we're going to do the fun part of, there's a crit. And then second check is a Breathing Dragon. Then we've got smaller number next, which is going to be 30, 35, 40, 48. And then the other side, which is 10, 20, 40, 45, 50, 56. And then the end of turn, we can choose 2 cards to put back into our Soul. And because we've got the want to be recalling this quite commonly, we'd be putting these 2 back into Soul. And then drawing a card, which is a Persona Ride. And then obviously powers all clear away. And we've now ended up with 1 face-up damage, so we only need to take 1 damage next turn to actually be able to do our combos again. But we've also got this we can intercept with, because we can then call our next Rising Dragon down from hand and get the filter again. But we've still got a very decent hand size to work with, which is really nice to have. Oops, I just realised that my camera's blocking off the damage a little bit there. Teehee. But that's that, so let's swap back to the main camera. So that was Luquier. Luquier, honestly, is a very solid tier 2 deck. Yes, we've not had any current upgrades, but we do have the shop promo coming up, which does say when it's put into Soul from anywhere, you can bind it and from your Soul, and then search your deck for a grade deck or drop, for any grade 3 card and put it into your Soul. So it does work nicely alongside Falsate Performer to get our exact pieces we want into our Soul within our Soul. You can even use Falsate to put this into Soul to then put this to change into a grade 3 to bypass the grade restrictions. So it does give more flexibility, and I will look into it again once we actually get the promo out in English and I've got my playset, because I've got to grab 4 of them at some point. But that's going to be it for this video. If you haven't done so already, please do like and subscribe. It very much does help the channel. And I shall catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.